And we will hear now from Sandy Gabe, our president. And Sandy, please.
Good morning or afternoon. I keep thinking this is in the morning, but good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandy Gabe. I am your AAUW California president. Are you ready to be amazed, inspired, and in some cases, perhaps mystified? That's what this afternoon holds for you. It's rare that we get to see a direct result of our investments, but today is an exception. Today, you have an opportunity to see your AAUW fund dollars at work with our fellow and grant recipients. You'll hear how the award has impacted their lives and their ability to pursue their passions. I'm pleased to introduce Karen Vanderwerken. She is the AAUW Fund Committee Chair, and she's a director on the Board of Directors. And she has been working with the fund fellows and with the communications team to pull this event together and to organize all of the scheduling and coaching our fellows. And I'm pleased to introduce her to you today.
Thank you, Sandy. I am a dual member of the Del Mar Leucadia and the Carlsbad Oceanside Vista branches, and I am the current chair of the San Diego Interbranch Council. So that's what keeps me busy. Welcome to the AAUW 2022 Fund event. Today we have 8 fellows and grantees studying in California. They will share nuggets of their fascinating studies. You will see what and who your AAUW dollars support. This year, AAUW California has 40 of the 320 national recipients. That's over 12%. There are 5 types of funding. We have 16 American Fellows. These women pursue full-time studies to complete dissertations, doctoral research, or research for publication. We have 6 career development grants. These women are pursuing a degree to enhance their careers in STEM fields. 3 community action grants. These are innovative programs promote equity among women and girls. We have 12 international fellows, women who pursue full-time graduate study in the US, but are not permanent residents. And there are 3 selected professional grants. These women pursue full-time study in a master's or professional degree, often in STEM. These exceptional recipients are pursuing academic work and leading innovative community projects to empower women. Previous honorees include astronauts, humanitarians, Supreme Court justices, Nobel laureates, all pioneering women who changed the world. Your generous donations enable these gifted women to use their intellectual powers for the good of humanity. We will now hear from, we will now hear from Greta Casino. She's in the 2nd year of her master's social work. Greta is working with geriatric community. She is advocating for their well-being by assisting seniors through their aging process. Her intention is to help ease their struggles by asking pertinent questions to find the right resources and to problem solve in order to make key decisions in their aging journey. Greta?
Thanks, Karen, for the introduction, and hi, everybody. I'm honored to be presenting to you today about my work with the geriatric population and how I'm advocating for better health and well-being of these individuals and their families to help them overcome personal struggles and challenges that they are facing in our communities and social systems. So thank you, AAUW, for contributing to my education and career advancement. Next slide, please. Since I'm a recipient of your career development grant, I want to start by sharing my background and how the earlier years of my career led to my calling as a social worker. I have an undergrad in computer science from the University of Houston, Victoria, and I worked in technology, managing key projects and accounts. I made a huge career change after being with the same company for 18 years. I made that transformation about 6 years ago when I became a full-time yoga teacher. And since then, I've been advocating for the health and wellness of my communities here in Los Angeles. I facilitated wellness workshops and currently teach at corporations and studios and to individuals. I also provided yoga therapy for a holistic clinic, working with a multidisciplinary team of doctors, therapists, and other wellness professionals. And we helped people that were struggling with chronic physical challenges. And during the time I spent with these individuals, I listened to their stories and learned how they have gone through at least one traumatic experience during their lifetime. And that was around the year 2018 when I started my journey in learning more about mental health and how trauma can get stuck in our bodies and the impacts it has on the brain and how our environment and communities can trigger those lived experiences. Next slide, please. So social work is a holistic approach to a person's health. So I am studying the whole person's environment and how the different systems within their environment can impact their well-being. The different factors influencing an individual's daily functioning are biological, psychological, social, and spiritual considerations. So when a person is struggling internally, and if there is a conflict in their communities or environment, the impact can be detrimental to their mental health. And with everything happening in our country and around the world, it is impacting everybody, and especially our vulnerable population, which is why our communities need social workers now more than ever. Social workers can provide interventions to help an individual's biological, psychological, social, and spiritual struggles. And are also able to identify other conflicts connected to their external systems, which where the individual may or may not be aware of. And those external systems are their relationships with family, school, work, value systems, hospitals, home environment, care team, the legal system, cultural influences and traditions, neighborhoods, and social networks. In my internship this year, the community that I'm focusing on is the geriatric population that are living with chronic physical and mental disabilities. I am working to advocate for their welfare by providing emotional support and finding them resources. I'm also working closely with their families, home environment, care team, neighborhood, and social networks. So I gave you an overview of the impact of social work on the micro level and how communities are connected to a person's mental health. So on this slide that you see here, I've listed some of the effective practices to improve the well-being of our communities on a broader level that can be implemented by the leaders of our communities. These effective practices that I'm studying are the trauma and resiliency of informed care approach, community-centered clinical practice model, community resiliency model, and culturally grounded systems. So for this presentation, I will just focus on my research on the benefits of adopting a trauma and resiliency informed care approach in human services organizations. The trauma and resiliency informed approach is a practice raising awareness and education on the impact of trauma and potential paths of recovery. It recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff members, the leadership team, and others involved and connected to the client system. So if we are looking at an independent care facility or a home health environment, The different areas that are connected that can impact the client system are the caregivers, family members, other residents, staff, employees, supervisors, the leadership team, and investors. Educating everyone that is connected to the client system in an organization about trauma and resiliency informed care and integrating that into the policies, procedures, and practices to resist re-traumatization is helping to enhance welfare and relationships among our communities. This approach considers a culturally grounded care and interventions that can help improve client and care team outcomes, as well as employee retention and staff wellness. I also used a community-centered clinical model approach in my research because it helps to understand the relationships among the employees and members because they are interconnected with the client system. Community-centered clinical model helps to identify problems between the care team and the client in order to make changes that are impactful and efficient so it can strengthen relationships while managing client issues at the leadership level. Next slide, please. So next year, I'll be moving into my advanced clinical internship where I will continue my research on evidence-based practice in psychotherapy. And as an advocate of health and wellness, my goal is to specialize in embodied therapy using mindfulness practices of yoga and meditation with psychotherapy. I also want to facilitate psychoeducational workshops and trainings and work with communities on population health and prevention. So I also want to mention that I ran for a position in student government to continue to develop my leadership skills and to build connections and community among our online cohorts. Most of us are women, and I want to help bring a voice to my fellow colleagues and bridge the gap between online and on-campus communities. And I also want to create a support system to empower others that are struggling with a class or an assignment. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your time and listening to my journey.
Our next student is Brianna Banks McLean. She is in selected professions at the University of California, Berkeley. Brianna professionally hopes to develop and implement new techniques in sustainable urban planning, fostering a holistic approach to substantiate urban design for future generations. As a career woman who became interested in architecture and engineering at home through her grandfather, she ultimately would like to travel back to the community and people who reared and inspired her. Please welcome Brianna.
Hello. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you, AAUW, for having me today and for your continued support. Again, my name is Brianna Banks McLean, and I am in my second year of a 3-year Master's of Architecture program at UC Berkeley currently. I'm going to talk a little bit today about my program framework, some of the projects I did last year, and some of the values that I hope to bring into my final semesters at Berkeley and beyond into my design practice. So in the next slide, I've sort of written down the program overview of the Masters of Architecture program at UC Berkeley, which focuses specifically on 3 frameworks that emphasize new and emerging positions in design media, an emphasis in diversity of design perspectives, as well as looking at the interplay of design and ecology within sustainable design in the urban landscape. And then the next slide. Oh, perfect. My work specifically in that past first year and well beyond and into my time at Berkeley has focused on cultivating an intrinsic design logic of space and structure through tools like modeling and community analysis. And as well, specifically, I've worked to increase my study around a thoughtful and holistic design approach within the ever-expanding Anthropocene, especially within the Bay Area, because we have so many sort of diverse and expanding spaces from San Francisco to Oakland and well beyond. So the next slide is one of my initial projects in my first semester at Berkeley. And this project is a community center for the arts that included a regional auditorium at its core. And it included a variety of disciplines, so spaces for art and recreation for the community within downtown Oakland in the art and design space. And the next slide as well is an expansion of that project, so looking at the exterior facade of the building. And this project was an integral challenge, especially in the first semester, in beginning to design for community and for its context. So working to expand my ideals around architecture beyond a sort of binary standard that often won't fit most of the urban context that we see now. So in the next slide, this next project was a mixed-use market space that was located in downtown San Francisco. So the final design for this project included a variety of spaces for markets, daycares, first aid spaces, offices, so a lot of different things going on. And the challenge of this design was creating a space in which all of these different use cases could thrive in one building, and sort of expanding the ideals around taking an interdisciplinary approach to design, especially in a space as dense and diverse as a major city like San Francisco, which you can sort of find all across the US and well beyond, and sort of using these use cases and designing them in a way that maximizes space without compromising the essentials, the essentials that I feel are the most important in designs, things like accessibility, safety, and functionality for all the people that are going to be using these spaces, daily and well beyond into the future. And in the next slide, this was one of the final projects we did in that year, which was a swimming pavilion, or a reimagining of an older swimming pavilion located along the San Francisco coast. And this really focused on that framework around the interplay of design and ecology, and was at the forefront of this project. And it began an exploration of how architecture may begin to integrate and coexist with its surrounding landscape rather than detract from it, and how we can sort of work to create technologies and engineering spaces that are able to coexist with the landscape that is sort of changing and shifting as we sort of see now and then well beyond into the future. And this last project on the next slide was a culmination of all of our own design ideals, and was a practice in how we may begin to reorganize the architectural space that already exists, that's already built. So looking at ways that we as designers can analyze our present built environment and begin to adapt it in a sustainable way to meet the needs of both the present and the future changing urban landscape. And in the last slide, as I continue my studies and begin my dissertation work in my third and final year, the design ideals at the forefront of my work encompass the holistic, sustainable, and equitable architectural framework that can begin to foster change on a political and social level, and as well as within our built environment. So thank you again to AUW, and thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Our next scholar is Christiane Asifa. Her research focuses on issues of race, gender, and forced displacement to examine the everyday life and organizing work of Black refugee communities in San Diego. This place-based project bridges conversations between critical geography, Black studies, and critical refugee studies. Those who are forcibly displaced and racialized communities on the US-Mexico borderland. Upon completing her dissertation, she hopes to become a tenure-track professor. Please welcome Christiane.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for that introduction. My name is Christiane Asifa, and I'm an ethnic studies PhD candidate in my 6th year at the University of California in San Diego. I'm so excited to be here and to share a little bit about my research. I'm so grateful for the support of AUW as, I try really hard to finish up this dissertation this year. We can go to the next slide. Today I'm going to be talking about my third chapter in my dissertation, the research I've done with the SDRCC. But before I dive into that, I just wanted to give a broad picture of what my dissertation is about. So my dissertation, titled Mapping Life Making, Race, Place, and Refugees in America's Finest City, is an interdisciplinary project about the knowledge production of East African refugees in San Diego. So what I argue is that, the everyday life and organizing practices of this community really contests the political landscape and the racial landscape of San Diego, which is known popularly as America's finest city. So I mobilized life making across 3 chapters that examine 3 distinct geographical scales, the first being the community center, the second, the neighborhood, and finally, coalition, which is what I'll be sharing a little bit with you about today. On the next slide, I'll give briefly how I came to this project. As an activist and organizer, I've worked with multiple refugee communities here in San Diego through mostly youth-led organizing programs here in San Diego, but this chapter relies on 12 oral histories I conducted with the SDRCC, which is comprised of different organizations that I've had relationships with over the course of the past 5 or so years. And, as a scholar of ethnic studies, it's really important that my research is accountable. So at every phase of this research project, from the development of research goals to questions and timeline, this was conducted with the coalition at every step. So in the next slide, I'll share a little bit about who the San Diego Refugee Communities Coalition is. It's a coalition that came together in early 2020, which coincides with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the coalition is made up of 11 ethnic-based community organizations. These are all refugee-led organizations who represent communities such as the Haitian community, the Kurdish community, Palestinian, Ethiopian, Eritrean, Sudanese. And more recently, they've had some Afghan refugee-led organizations join their coalition as well. So this is a really diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic group. And on the next slide, one key element that I think is important about this coalition is their model. So one thing that the coalition told me when before we began the oral histories was that they really wanted to document their model and also the scope of their work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So my oral histories really centered on the narratives around community health and wellness. And through these conversations on health and wellness, what I learned was that their coalitional model really enables the coalition to reimagine and redefine what community health means. On the next slide, I'll get into that a little bit more. So the SDRCC, over the course of the pandemic, their work ranged from providing rent support to tech training for online learning, domestic violence intervention, counseling, diaper drop-offs, right? So they were really conducting these very intimate acts of support and care that I argue redefines community health away from medicalized definitions of health that center on illness in the body. And instead, through their model, they were able to really approach health as something that was, broadly shaped and determined by our social, political, and economic world. And the elements of the model through which these narratives about health emerged displayed that there is a shared understanding, a desire to take collective action, and a really collaborative participatory decision-making model that allows them to work together towards these really insightful definitions of community health. On the next slide, we can kind of just skip through these next 3 slides for the sake of time. But yeah, again, like I was saying earlier, these were the 3 key elements of the model that enabled them to act in solidarity and really transform definitions of health. And we can actually just dive right into the next slide as well. I really wanted to share with you all some direct quotes from the oral histories I conducted that display how this community understands health. So here we have one woman who shared, her experience with Islamophobia. She says that she wants to feel safe when walking down the street, and to her, health really means that the city, the mayor, schools, businesses, all work together. And she says that there has to be a healthy and good system in order for her to be healthy as well. The next slide, we had another coalition member who said that health isn't just about when you get sick and finding a place to get help. It's also about every moment of your life, having support, like emotional support, and someone you can rely on. And lastly, this definition of health, which is the agency to make choices in life and the agency to fulfill your full potential. So a lot of the findings that I had from this set of oral histories, like I said, informed my 3rd chapter of my dissertation. And I'm really grateful I got to share just a tidbit with you all. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you. We have Sharman Goring. She is one of the liaisons for the AAUW Legacy Circle. Sharman cares deeply about AAUW, as evidenced by her 30-year membership and her commitment to volunteer leadership and her financial commitment as a Legacy Circle liaison. Sharman has served in positions at the branch, state, and national levels. In her spare time, she is a special education teacher, mom to Jack and Nick, and Gigi to Amelia. Please welcome Sharman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the Legacy Circle. I know some of you are aware of it and are probably wearing your pins like I'm wearing mine. Oh, where's over here today? I saw the participant list, so we have a few on the call list today. And really what I was thinking about is over the 30 years I've belonged to AEW, which now does make me middle-aged, by the way. But I noticed that I have been to so many meetings and events and planned events and board meetings and conventions and more meetings and Zoom meetings. And all of this is leading towards, showing my commitment and my values in life. And I've been showing this to my family. My boys have both grown up. My youngest son actually at a month old went to an AEW meeting with me. And so they've been watching me pursue this, equity for women and girls throughout my life. And I've been trying to think more about my legacy and what does it look like when I'm gone. And so one way I discovered is the Legacy Circle. And when I was on the national board about 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk about development and giving from the board and the Legacy Circle, and it involved, money. And I was at the time the youngest member on the board, working full-time, single mom, school teacher, not a lot of resources in the financial department. And so I was very quiet. I felt this didn't pertain to me, but I was talking to one of the staff, and she explained to me that the Legacy Circle really is, one, it's money you give after you're gone, so it doesn't affect your income currently or at the moment, and also it's more of a commitment, really the commitment of your values and your commitment to seeing AEW extend beyond your own lifetime. And as we all know from the news and the media, and just what's happening in our world, our mission, excuse my dog, is still really relevant today, and maybe even getting more relevant as we go through elections this fall. So Legacy Circle is very simple. It's a simple application. It's mostly just putting your name and address and then checking off that you've made a change in your will, or your somehow you've designated some money for EW after you've passed away. And there's lots of ways you can do it. Mine I thought was the most simple. I went online to a 401k I have, and I just changed the beneficiary from my children to 50% my children, 50% AEW. So right now it's a small amount. because it's a newer 401k. But as I go through my employment and, head to the end of my life, hopefully it'll get a little bit larger. You can also do a specific request. You can do a charitable gift annuity, which would then pay you some income through the rest of your life, as well as providing for EW. So it's just a really great way to show your commitment now, and also show your commitment to AEW, as when we're no longer here, because AEW will still be here. Our funds will still be here, and there will certainly still be a need for AEW. So if anyone has any questions, you can talk to either myself or Judy Horan, who is my Southern California counterpart, or you can go online, just search Legacy Circle, and you can find more information in the form there. And again, it's very easy. We have about 145 members in California. So we have the most of every state, but we certainly have lots of room to grow. And I hope to welcome more of you to our small group in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Our next candidate is Marin Bhattacharya. I can do this, Bhattacharya. She is working, her work centers on crossroads of literature, philosophy, and political theory, with a particular focus on French republicanism. She is currently finishing her manuscript on French republicanism and its legitimation crises. Please welcome Marin.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, AEW, for the grant. It allowed me to do the research and complete writing. One of the chapters of my dissertation, the title of the chapter is Creolizing Universalism and Post-Colonial Citizenship. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little more about my background. So I'm a literary and cultural studies scholar. I'm a visiting assistant professor at the University of California, Irvine. So the larger question I was looking at, and I'm looking at for my book manuscript, is how literary and visual narratives historicize conceptions of race, racialized migratory experiences, and materiality in contemporary France. And I explored this relationship through the axis of migration, memory, emotions, and divergent experiences of citizenship of French Black and French Arab communities. In the next slide, a little more about the book project. The book manuscript is titled Dissident Universalisms and Post-Colonial Citizenship. And through the works of many contemporary authors, I studied the experiences and articulations of Black and Arab citizenship in France, and try to write an alternate tale of the relationship between racialized minorities and the French nation state. And as a literary scholar, I'm invested in also trying to explore and convince my readers about the important role of literature in preserving and giving shape to the memories, feelings, emotions, and lived experiences through literary narratives, and how some of these experiences are often excluded from institutional archives and can only be traced through literary narratives. So a little bit more in the next slide about my summer research. As I was telling, I completed writing a chapter, and I looked at the works of Afro-diasporic authors and their attempt to theorize this relationship between memories, migration, and aesthetics. And the author I chose to focus on in this chapter is Leonora Miano. She is a French author of French and Francophone studies, and who was born in Cameroon, but she migrated to France when she was quite young, and she is very unique in her approach to the question of migration, and she explores the ways in which many ways in which individual identity and colonial memory are co-constituted. So I thought it would be an appropriate terrain of research. And so I explored the ways in which she constructs these narratives of co-constitution. And also, because of her experience in the larger diaspora, I thought it would be important to analyze the emergence of a certain transhistorical Blackness in her work, and how she conceptualizes it. So in the next slide, I will focus on how Miano chooses the framework of migration to analyze and interpret the diverse experiences of asylum seekers and migrants. So many of our characters are also young students of Afro-diaspora communities who are continuously examining their relationship with the framework of French citizenship that often has laws that exclude their lived experiences or religious experiences, and create this very unique narratives between which question the French laws. So this framework of migration allows Miano to evoke culturally diverse visual language, dialectical vocabulary, different culturally appropriate references and historical allusions in the novels in question. And some of the novels I worked with are Stardust and Tel des Astretans. These two novels were written at very different points of her career. So we are also able to quite retrace how Miano herself has evolved as a writer, and how migration still continues to be a focal point in her writing. In the next slide, I will talk about how I was able to get a book contract this summer, and thanks to AUW for the publication grant, and which provided the opportunity to really focus on research and writing of this chapter. Thank you again.
Thank you. What interesting studies we have, right? Our next student is Maya Tenbrink, and she's an American Fellowship at Stanford University in psychology. Her work focuses on how emotions, emotion regulation, and sleep interact and influence one another in daily life. Her goal is to understand the dynamic processes that support psychological well-being and develop targets for interventions in healthy as well as clinical adolescents and adults. Maya?
Thank you so much. So I want to thank the AUW for inviting me to share about my work and for supporting my dissertation research. Next slide. So one of the most extraordinary and fundamental features of being human is that we have these perturbations in our psychological states called affect, feelings, emotions, moods. And then we have these long, freaky periods of unconsciousness every 24 hours, adding up to about a third of our lives spent asleep. So for decades, the psychology field didn't even directly address either of these mysteries head on, much less begin to ask questions about how these two phenomena interacted with each other. Next slide. Even so, most of us have pretty strong intuitions from our daily experiences that there is this connection between how we feel and how we sleep. Next slide. So what I want to talk to you today is about how far the science is from our intuition, that what we feel influences how we sleep, and how we sleep influences how we feel. In clinical populations such as depression, PTSD, and bipolar disorder, the evidence for this link is much stronger, but in general populations, the evidence is very mixed. We don't see a clear pattern. And so I set out to try to understand why that might be and what was really going on in these mixed findings. Next slide. I proposed a granular dimensional framework to understand links between sleep and affect, starting from a pretty basic premise that sleep and affect are each multidimensional constructs. So sleep scientists and affective scientists each make distinctions within their respective fields along different dimensions. So they can describe an observation as belonging to a particular domain within sleep or affect. So a sleep domain might be sleep quality or duration or timing of bedtime and wake time. Affect domains might be positive affect, negative affect, arousal level, specific emotions. We can also describe an observation by their method of measurement. So whether they were self-reported, like filling out a survey, or whether there were physiological or behavioral measures taken. And we can also describe an observation by the time scale of the experience being measured. And basically, my idea was that we need to understand each of these concepts with these granular distinctions in order to understand associations between them. Next slide. So I did a systematic review of 80 scientific articles to try to organize the complexity in the literature based on these domains, methods, and timescales for affect and sleep observation. And I looked separately at patterns for affect influencing sleep and sleep influencing affect. And I uncovered several interesting, robust relationships, but also a lot of counterintuitive null patterns where there wasn't any association, and a lack of fully bidirectional links when taking granular distinctions into account. And in addition, I also uncovered gaps in the research or areas where patterns of results really didn't converge at all. So my dissertation follows up on some of those gaps and areas of non-convergence that I identified. Next slide. And broadly, my dissertation studies, which the remaining studies are all empirical kind of experiments or observational studies, focus on trying to gain a deeper understanding of the dynamics and mechanisms of this bidirectional relationship. So in study 1, I examine whether how pre-sleep positive affect plays a role on subsequent sleep quality in adults. In study 2, I look at whether there is this stress sleep spiral that occurs in adults, also occurs in adolescents, and if so, whether coping self-efficacy, which is the belief that one can cope with stress, can interrupt that spiral. In study 3, I examine how affect in the evening and the morning are related to neural activity in the brain during the intervening sleep period. And in study 4, I look at how affect regulation, which is the process of changing one's emotions or emotional trajectory, can play a role in modulating the relationship between sleep and affect. Next slide. So in summary, I'm really interested in this intersection of sleep and affect. I think it's really ripe for research and really important for kind of general well-being. Hopefully, using my granular dimensional framework, I can help identify some patterns that do exist, or maybe shift focus away from areas where there is less empirical evidence, but it's still really mysterious as to why the empirical data don't seem to match our understanding of our own experiences of affect and sleep. And there could be many sources of complexity, which my dissertation follows up on, with the aim of revealing important mechanisms that hopefully allow us to develop precise and targeted treatments to try to improve well-being across a broad spectrum of the population. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you so much. We're now going to hear from Sharon Schuster. She has held many leadership roles in AAUW and other organizations. Most notably, she served as president of AAUW, the AAUW Educational Foundation, and the AAUW Legal Advocacy Fund before those three corporations were merged. She continues to support AAUW by leading the Monine Leche Giving Circle.
Hello. You may not have heard of the Monine Leche Giving Circle, a unique way to give to AUW projects. Monine Leche was the epitome of an AUW volunteer and giver, always going beyond what was asked to contribute in both time and money for AUW. 25 years ago, we formed a giving circle to commit to funding projects within AUW that might not have happened without our support. We funded the printing and distribution of a number of research reports, such as Crossing the Line about sexual harassment in schools, Solving the Equation, the variables for women's success in engineering and computing, and Deeper in Debt, Women and Student Loans. Note that we are still working on these issues and many others that have been on AUW's agenda for many years. We funded community action grants in California when R&P funds ran out, and we have funded Get Out the Vote campaigns. Our commitment is always to projects funded with current funds rather than endowed funds. We choose the projects we want our contributions to enhance. Our individual commitment is to contribute at least $300 a year. That's if we've been giving at what we call the chocolate club level already. If a member has not been giving at that level, we ask for $500 for the first year and then to raise it to $1,000 in 2 years. Those that make such a commitment then become a member of the Giving Circle and participate in the decision-making about new projects. But anyone can make a contribution to the Giving Circle in any amount by noting that they wish their contribution to go to fund number 8229. We are currently in the process of working out the details of our next project, and you can be part of that decision. Contact me for more information, or if you have questions about the Monine Leche Giving Circle.
Yes, we're now ready for our next student. There was one correction, I think, in the recording. The wrong number was given, but if somebody donates, it's going to auto default to the correct fund number. Our next student is Janeth Japleting. She has an international fellowship and is studying at Pepperdine University in public policy. Janeth is from Nairobi, Kenya, and she would like to thank the AUW Fellowship for this opportunity to help her achieve her goal, a master's in public policy. Her interest has always been to bring positive change to our society, and public policy is the first step. She is looking forward to empowering women and girls, and she wants to be their second chance, like AAUW has been to her. Janeth?
Thank you. Thank you, Director, for giving me an opportunity, and everyone else in AAUW. I would like to thank the President and the stakeholders for the opportunity. First, first slide, please. My personal story is the most incentive for pursuing master's degree in public policy today. My story is that I got pregnant at the age of 14, and my relatives tried to force me into early marriages, but because of my determination to pursue education and my resilience, I'm here today. Where I grew up in my village, education to girls is very low. Girls are not given opportunities on education sectors because of many reasons, which are early teenage pregnancies, poverty, lack of role models, and so on. Also, the reason why I'm pursuing master's degree today is because recently my country discovered a vast amount of natural resources, and they need policy analysts to channel these resources for the betterment of the country, and I'm looking forward to it. Next slide. As you see from the photo on my screen is a photo of a pregnant teenage, which was taken back in 2020. Credit photo to Monica. This photo says a lot. You can see that on the ground, you are able to see the poverty. And the problem is not the teenage pregnancies, but the major problem is the poverty. Their education careers are cut short due to poverty. They are forced into sex through rape or through some behaviors by older men getting gifts for these girls in exchange for sex. And next slide, please. Public policy and dispute resolution is public policy is about people. It's about restoring back human dignity. What comes in my mind when I think of public policy is the daily challenges we go through and the fact that the government has neglected to provide solution for it. There are many policies areas, but women are the most affected people, especially in developing countries like Kenya. Early pregnancies, young girls face early pregnancies, and also because of this, they are forced into early marriages. According to 2021 research data, it shows that we've got 152,000 new teen mothers. Why public policy? Based on the African Institute for Development Policy Facts Research, Kenya is leading on teenage early pregnancies. Hence, this has led to high percentage on school dropouts. Where I grew up, girls and women are not given an education opportunity, especially when there is limited resources. We have girls and young women who would want to go for their dreams, but they lack support, and I want to fight for their rights. Also, women's rights are not respected, and hence we need more women to exercise more political power and economic affairs so that these policies are respected. Next slide, please. What are the solutions? To curb these early teenage pregnancies, we need to educate teenagers and girls the importance of abstaining from sex at a younger age and before marriage. We also need to emphasize more on education and raise funds to take those who already have children back to school because they are still immature and also young to start their own families. Also, we need to talk to organizations we also need to talk to organizations, for example, churches, schools, society, and also parents to take responsibilities of educating a girl, because there is an African proverb which says, it takes a village to raise a child. And also we need to educate young men on the effects of sex before marriages. Next slide. My contribution on public policy would be before I joined Pepperdine, I've always wanted to give back to society because today I'm here due to many philanthropists who have been part of my journey. So I'm hoping that after my master's degree, I'll create policies in favor of girls and young women to fight for their education rights and equality in Kenya and the world. Also, I'll start funding activities to support them since I've been on their shoes before, and I do understand the need for education and change. I'm also aspiring to go for parliamentary seat so that I push for these policies to be implemented. Because as I mentioned before, women's rights are not respected and we need more women in political power and economic affairs. So I'm looking forward. Also, we'll run a mentorship program to inspire them. Before I joined Pepperdine, I've been a volunteer at Endless Frontier Foundation. This is a feeding program in Nairobi whereby they focus on young people's lives and children. We do provide food, mentorship program, and I've been contributing a lot on mentorship program. And I'm hoping that after my master's, I'll take this to the next level. Thank you so much for AAUW and the stakeholders for giving us women second opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Our next scholar is Shirley Ruiz. She has a career development grant at Pepperdine University. For 15 years, she has supported students with disabilities in several capacities in higher education. Most recently, she was the alternate media specialist supporting students with disabilities in gaining access to textbooks and other course content in a format that is accessible to their assistive technology. She is dedicated to ensuring meaningful access for students with disabilities and is currently pursuing a master's degree in organizational leadership. Shirley?
Hello, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Okay, so hello, good afternoon. My name is Shirley Ruiz. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to AAUW for hosting this event today and also for the career development that allows me to pursue a master's in organizational leadership and learning at Pepperdine University. Thank you. A little bit background, if you can go to the next slide. As it was mentioned, for the past 15 years, I've had several positions in higher education supporting students with disabilities. I primarily work with students who are visually impaired, blind or low vision, students who have mobility limitations or have a learning disability. I assist our students in gaining meaningful access to their textbooks and course content in a format that's accessible to their assistive technology devices. This may be a specific format such as a Word document, an accessible PDF, HTML, or even Braille or raised line graphics. I've had the privilege of working with many students directly and truly understanding what it means to have accessible content in their education. At the start of the COVID pandemic, I realized that although I have built my technical skill set in accessibility, my role actually indirectly contributes to our students not having access to certain course content. What I mean by this is our faculty and others are creating awesome course content, but they're unaware of the accessibility barriers that they may be creating for students who are using assistive technology. And because my role is to help students gain access to the inaccessible course content creators never truly understand how to create accessible course content that is accessible to all. Next slide. And so at the start of the pandemic, I realized that I wanted to be a leader in this. And so I began to pursue my education in organizational leadership and learning. And I'd like to lead the way and champion accessibility. I want to be able to share with others the need for accessibility and the importance of accessibility. I'd like to be able to share my knowledge and enthusiasm about accessibility and access, to teach, motivate, and inspire course content creators to create with accessibility in mind. Our students deserve to be able to have access to their course content so that they can pursue their educational and career goals. And so my goal is to play a small part in changing the world for people with disabilities. Thank you so much for the grant award. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next scholar is Kendra Cleveland. She is working in selected professions at the University of California, Berkeley. She's a developmental psychologist, and she's currently pursuing a law degree. She seeks to amplify the voices of parents and children navigating legal systems and to promote family well-being through research to policy translation. She is also dedicated to reforming policies surrounding access, promotion, and opportunities for women and communities of color in higher education. She is pursuing her policy goals as a member of the Policy Advocacy Clinic at Berkeley. Kendra?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for all of the AAUW supporters that we have here today. I'm going to be talking with you all about children, families, and the law. Next slide, please. So to share a bit about my background and my journey to becoming an AAUW fellow, I started out at the University of California, Irvine, where I earned my PhD in developmental psychology and examined how parents and families navigate legal systems, as well as how judges make decisions in those systems. From there, I went on to do a postdoc at Vanderbilt University, and then worked at a number of UCs, so Davis, Los Angeles, San Diego, and then decided I'd like to go back and really improve upon my ability to advocate for families, both within the higher education setting, as well as families who are navigating legal systems. And so now am a 2L at Berkeley Law. Next slide, please. So the population that I'll be talking with you all about today is families who have experienced child maltreatment. That could be allegations of abuse, but most often is allegations of neglect. There are in the US annually 4 million reports of child maltreatment, and 700,000 of those are substantiated, meaning there's some sort of evidence that we should look into these cases further. Now, there can be really serious consequences of these cases, one of them being the termination of parental rights, which means that the parent-child relationship is legally severed. And recent research has found that 1 in 100 children in the US will experience a TPR, with Black children being disproportionately represented and experiencing TPRs at 2 times the rate of white children. Next slide, please. So the legal system that handles these cases is juvenile justice. And oftentimes when people hear that, they think of youth who have gotten in trouble with the law, some sort of truancy. And that is the delinquency branch of juvenile justice. But there's also what's called the dependency branch, and that is the branch that handles cases of child maltreatment. And so when there is an allegation of maltreatment, children are oftentimes removed from their homes. And then the goal is to have parents engage in an intervention so that parents and families can be safely reunified. However, only about 50% of the cases that come before these courts will culminate in family reunification. Okay, next slide. And so what are some of the barriers to reunification? Well, one of them is certainly parents' ability to understand this court process that they're navigating. My dissertation found that in a sample of about 150 parents, that 12% of them did not understand what was happening and what the judge had just decided as they walked out of their court hearings, or they were just incorrect about what the judge had just decided. And even more parents, about 50% of them, did not understand common language and terms that are used in the system or how to navigate the hearings that they were required to attend. Next slide. And it's really no wonder. If you look at this flow chart, you can immediately see how complex it is. And attorneys who work in these cases will often tell me it's taken me years to learn how this juvenile dependency system works, and I'm still learning. And so we expect parents, though, to kind of come into the system overnight and be able to navigate it successfully in a very shortened time frame, typically about a year to 15 months. Next slide, please. So in addition to the challenges with understanding these cases, they can also be somewhat psychologically intimidating. I remember the first time that I went into a juvenile dependency court. I was there to do some research, and I walked into a courtroom that looked much like this. I had already been through security, and a bailiff walked up to me very quickly and said, "What case are you here for?" And it took me a moment, and I said, I'm here to do some research, and I turned around and quickly took my seat. But that experience made me think about what it might be like for families who come into the system and are really taking the brunt of the judgment, and how that can be psychologically intimidating and also invoke anxiety among families as well. Next slide. So we've talked about challenges with understanding, with potential intimidation. And there's also a lot of requirements that families have to do when they become a part of these cases. So they have to go to classes, treatments, assessments multiple times a week, and hope that their boss, if they are employed, will allow them to engage in all of those so that they can maintain their income as well as their housing for their families. And then some families, even though many of them are coming from poverty or are low income, have to make child support payments as a part of these cases. So again, their child's involuntarily removed from their care, and then they're required to make a payment to the state for their child to be outside of their care. And so what are some of the solutions to this? Next slide, please. Well, at the Policy Advocacy Clinic at Berkeley Law, we are working to implement a bill that the governor just signed at the end of last month, Assembly Bill 1686. And what this is going to do is help to reduce the number of families who are required to make these payments when they become a part of one of these cases. And so this is expected to decrease the amount of time that children have to spend outside of their homes, to decrease the number of TPRs that I talked about, and to increase the number of families who are able to safely reunify. And in addition to some of this policy work, I am doing pro bono work in the community with the East Bay Family Defenders to think upstream about how we can prevent families from ever entering the system through legal education, as well as supporting them in their communities rather than in a court system that can be very punitive. Next slide. So I would like to thank each of you for your time, again, especially to AAUW for supporting my return to school and pursuit of the JD, but more importantly for supporting work that is going to impact a number of children, women, and families across California. So thank you again.
Thank you, Kendra. AAUW Fund. This is where we put our money to the test, as you have seen so far today. Are you inspired by these amazing women? We are tenacious and trailblazing. We advocate for women well into the future, as seen by Legacy and the Moon Lecce funds. You may schedule one of these speakers or a speaker from any of the other events. They can attend a branch or an IBC event. You can click, there's a link here that you can make a donation. You can do it online. You can do it by check, by credit card. Just please say in honor of an AAUW California Fund event. Then we know that we're making a good splash doing these events. We encourage donations towards our annual goal of $525,000. We're close. We're at $405,000. Donate now and state that it's in honor of the AAUW Fund. Next. How does it help your branch? We help you with branch fundraising. We plan the fund events such as this. Today, we encourage giving to the AAUW Fund, and we schedule the fellowship and grant recipients to speak at the branches. Next. Here's a selection in AAUW California of national funding opportunities. The first one, the one we generally call just giving to AAUW Fund, that's the Greatest Needs Fund. That is the only fund that is completely unrestricted. And that's the kind of fund that helps to support these graduate students. We have Nick Wessel, we have the Moon Lecce Giving Circle, and there was a newer one added this earlier this year, the Diane Owens Honorary Fund. Several of the area branches had said with Diane's outstanding contribution as president and as a fund director and pocket full of years of work, they decided to do this. And we actually have a link here. This will be live once we put this out to the public. Next. There are some key dates. December 31st is the deadline to be included in this year's donations. We have named gift nominations. There are two kinds. There's state named gift nominations, and then there are branch named gift nominations. Every year, the AAUW California Fund Committee honors AAUW California members who've done outstanding work in supporting the programs and goals of AAUW. For branches, a named gift is a special way to pay tribute to an individual, a group, or an organization giving extraordinary service to AAUW. Branches can nominate a named gift honoree for each $750 contributed by the branch or branch members on or before December 31st. The State Named Gift Award is given to an AAUW member who has done outstanding work to promote the programs and goals of AAUW California. Please submit only one nomination per branch on the state. Next. The success of this event certainly was a team effort. We have the fund committee, Judy Horan, Charmin Goring, Deanna Author, Elizabeth Bathgate, Jan Cook, and Sharon Westifer, and the communications committee, Randa Blanding, Julika Barrett, Dawn Johnson, and Linda Slater, and of course, our awesome president, Sandy Gabe. Following right now is a message from our AAUW National Coordinator, Katrina Sun Breeze. Katrina Sun Breeze is a Senior Director of Institutional Advancement at AAUW's National Office. She's responsible for developing and implementing all aspects of AAUW's philanthropic and dues revenue generation programs. She has over 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership. Prior to joining AAUW, Katrina was the Vice President of Development at Asian and Pacific Islander Americans, the nation's largest organization dedicated to supporting student access to and success in higher education.
California members, it is a great pleasure to join you all today and share with you more information about AAUW's Greatest Needs. In my role as Senior Director of Institutional Advancement, I lead our membership and fundraising teams. It's my goal today to articulate what AAUW's Greatest Needs are, provide examples of what Greatest Needs donations have supported in the past, and highlight the important role that branches and members play in elevating our mission-centered work. First, what is the importance of Greatest Needs? It supports our AUW strategic priorities, sustains AUW well into the future, empowers AUW National to be nimble and responsive to current events and issues, and maintains and expands our national presence. Next, what are our strategic priorities? It includes education and training, economic security, leadership, governance, and sustainability. Now, some examples of Greatest Needs supported work include our research, supporting the updates to and dissemination of Simple Truth and Deeper in Debt, our programming, which fills the gaps when restricted funding does not cover 100% of the costs. These programs include Nick Whistle, Work Smart, Start Smart, Money Smart, and Empower. Our policy activities, advocating for AUW's values. The majority of our policy team's budget is supported by Greatest Needs. Operations, supporting our infrastructure and sustainability, adding to unrestricted reserves, helps us to weather future economic instability. Membership. Greatest Needs funds allows us to provide support to our branches and states and offer opportunities to better connect and engage with you. This includes our Connect team and site resources. Lastly, communications. In 2021, we had over 3.1 million social media impressions, and our work has been cited in national publications such as ABC News, Diverse Issues in Higher Education, Refinery 29, MSNBC, New York Magazine, Philanthropy News Digest, Fortune, Market Watch, Forbes, The Hill, Yahoo, and many more. In particular, I'd like to highlight Greatest Needs support of AUW's research, education, and advocacy work, as we have some powerful impact numbers to share. Over 188,000 individuals have taken AUW's salary negotiation programs. AUW's 2018 landmark research report, Deeper in Debt, Women and Student Loans, was updated. 145 colleges and universities, including 32 minority-serving institutions and historically Black colleges and universities, offer AUW's Start Smart salary negotiation training. Over 1,400 college women leaders from 300 campuses nationwide attended AUW National's Conference for College Women Student Leaders, or Nick Whistle, in 2021 and 2022. 68,000 plus letters were sent to elected officials via AUW's 2-minute activist program, and over $6 million, which for us is a historic record, in fellowships and grants were awarded to 320 women due to the fully endowed Fellowships and Grants Fund. Our Greatest Needs ensures AUW's seat at the table in critical conversations advancing gender equity for women and girls. This includes our seat at the White House Gender Policy Council, UN Women, the UN entity for gender equity and the empowerment of women, the White House Equal Pay Summit with President and Mrs. Biden, US NGO Commission on the Status of Women, Speaker Pelosi's Women's History Month celebration this past year, the Institute for Women's Policy Research Power Summit, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs Special Consultative Status, and many more. Our branches play an important role in supporting Greatest Needs through fundraising. In addition to making a local impact, branch fundraising for National Greatest Needs ensures each branch is also supporting AUW's mission on a national level. By reaching out to your local community and fundraising from both members and non-members, branches are helping to build awareness about AUW's mission and long-standing history as a champion of equity for women and girls. We have many AUW funds chairs in branches across the country, but of course, especially in California. And these funds chairs lead and support branch fundraising initiatives, assist with stewarding and thanking our local donors, serve as a point of contact from the branch to the national office. And we are so appreciative of the important role that these funds chairs and other member leaders across the country and in California especially are playing. Now more than ever, we need your support. Whether it's the catastrophic effect of the pandemic on women's employment, challenges to women's rights, which seem to pop up every day, snail-paced progress on pay equity and leadership positions for women, or the over $900 billion in student debt held by women, and women's lack of economic security that we continue to face. All of these issues make it even more pressing that we receive your support.
Request a scholar to speak at your branch. Scholars can be strong motivators when deciding where to donate money. Thank you for attending today's fund event. There's one event remaining on November 12th. Be sure to register for it. If you attended this one and you want someone else from your branch to see some scholars, have them register. We have 11 scholars in this next group. Thank you again.